Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for continuing to support my channel. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Babel, or the Necessity of Violence and something Oxford History. It's got a long title, but it was by R.F. Kuang. I think you know the book I'm talking about. And if not, then just look right there. And I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was just right now. So I liked this book. It was good. It certainly wasn't great. I had a lot of problems with it, but I did enjoy my experience. And I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. And let me go through about what this book's about and my general thoughts about this. So, you know, I really thought this was a book of 3 parts. You know, in the first kind of third of this book, you know, I was really digging it. I thought it was like a 4 out of 5. You know, I didn't have a lot of faults other than the plot was taking a long time to pick up. And I don't mind that because generally in fantasy books, you see a rather slow progression of plot before it reaches a crescendo. And with that kind of promise in mind, not a promise that Kuang had made, but a promise that fantasy books have made, you know, I was very optimistic about this book. Now, the second third of the book, I thought things started to take a dip. I'd say like a 3 out of 5. It just took a weird direction. I don't want to go into too much details about what that weird direction is because I don't want to ruin anything here. But it felt like we were reading an entirely different book, which is fine. It happens. But unfortunately, in the last like quarter of this book, it wasn't like a full third, but the last quarter, I thought that it very much failed. I'd give it like a 2 out of 5. I hate it when endings really flub things. I could even rate this book lower because of that. But, you know, I want to be fair. And overall, I'd say my overall enjoyment's 3 out of 5. And, you know, I'm kind of glad that I didn't get the arc of this book. I applied for the arc on NetGalley. I never get arcs. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know, but I never get them. And so I said, you know what? I'm not going to go out and rush to read this book. I'm just going to get it when I can get my hands on it at the library, which is how I read most of my books. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't because I feel bad kind of being the one guy to say negative things about a book when they first come out and really kind of hurt an author. I'll do it. I'm never going to lie to you on this channel, but I always feel bad about it. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that I read it now when most of you have already read this book and I'm not really going to influence too many people. You know, I felt like overall that in an inexplicable way, I was drawn into this story. It was intriguing. I wanted to see this story out, and I liked the journey that we went on for a large part of this book. However, you know, it felt like this was kind of like an essay wrapped up in kind of like a novel format. You know, you know, the reader kept kind of getting beat over the head with Kuang's views on things. And it didn't allow the reader to kind of come to these conclusions on our own. The trust, for some reason, Kuang did not trust the reader to figure things out. And so she had to really drive things in. And I hate that. I mean, treat your readers intelligently. I'm not by any means on the high end of the intelligence spectrum when it comes to reading fantasy books. I often feel lost. I feel more lost than the average reader sometimes. But I like audibly a couple times wanted to yell out like, I get it. You know, you don't need to keep going down these themes and trying to drive them home. But, you know, it is what it is. So let's go down my breakdown of the different elements of this book. And we're going to start with the story. So in a non-spoiler way, what I can say about this story is that this is essentially about this boy, Robin. And it all covers from his perspective. He is from China. And at a very, very young age, his mother, not very young, but as a child, his mother dies. And his father takes him from China over to England, and he decides to train him up so that eventually he can go to Oxford. This book takes place in the early 1800s, and it feels like a history book. It doesn't even feel like, you know, historical fiction. It feels like, you know, historical nonfiction. But there are fantasy elements here that at the beginning of the book, they feel very subtle, but as they ramp up and you start to see these kind of this magic system kind of play out, it's like, oh yeah. But it's written in this kind of like scholarly way. And I don't want to say that too negatively because I love history books. Before I really got into fantasy, that's what I read like all the time. So I don't mind that at all, but that's what you're going to get here. In fact, it's kind of, because the setting here is Oxford, I think Kuang even does things like putting a lot of footnotes in that give a lot more details to make it look kind of more like an article. And it very much comes off like that. So Robin has this traumatic childhood, and he starts to grow up in this environment at this school where he wants to train to become a translator. And he quickly becomes friends with this group of 4, and they become like the greatest best friends, and like the one real family that he's ever had. And it's about school and training, and it's like a very long training montage with some suspenseful aspects in it as well that I will not ruin for you. But note that there is this undercurrent of this other thing going on. An overall theme of this book is racism. The author wants you to know real quick that racism's bad, and that you should not treat people that way. No duh. We all get that. You don't need to like beat me in with it, but whatever. And it's also about England becoming like this world superpower, more so than England was in the Victorian era. Where they really are looking for like global dominance using this magic system that I will go to in just a moment. In fact, normally I do magic systems third, but let's go to that next. So the magic system all surrounds the use of silver. In this story, silver has these very magical properties, and I'm going to mess up how to explain it here, but very broadly, if you can break down words and the history of how a word became into what it is today, and can kind of tie it to the modern meaning, to the original meaning, and play around with that word a little bit, that silver can combine to have magical properties. When you combine these words and you inscribe them physically into the silver, it can make, your boats go faster. It can make, messages, kind of teleport. It can do all sorts of magical things. And that's what makes this book more of a fantasy book. Now, it starts off very subtle and becomes very heavy-handed later on. There's large portions of this book about, these students in these linguistic lessons, and I found it interesting. I did get a little bored of these lessons as it went along. It's like, I get it, words change meanings. I don't need to like learn like these hundreds of different words in the history of these words to be interested in what these students are happening here. That's not why I'm reading this book. I'm reading it for the story. I want to know what goes on here. But yeah, that's the magic system in a nutshell. So the world here. Now this is set on Earth. It's a historical setting, but I will say that I did enjoy the world building quite a bit. The author took a long time to build up what it feels like to go to Oxford in the early 1800s. Now, I have no concept whether this is really how Oxford was. My guess is not. In fact, the author even warns you before the book starts in the preface that she didn't go to Oxford, and she doesn't want to offend people that went there. To say that's not how things went, because this is a fantasy book. But there was a lot of build-up here to explain things and really make you feel like you're going to school here. And in a very large part, the author achieved here. I thought it was a very good job setting the stage and really transporting me into this world, and I appreciated that slow build to get to this point. The characters. Now things are going to go downhill a little bit for me. The characters, while I did enjoy Robin, I thought Robin was a very well-built character that goes through a lot of character growth. All the other characters, I feel like, were rather one-dimensional. And the way that they grow feels forced. In fact, it kind of felt to me like these characters were written to serve the plot. Rather than develop on their own and have their own unique personalities. In fact, I legitimately kind of lost track after a little while of which character was which. It felt like it didn't really matter. That they were all just, there to serve Robin and Robin's plot as he went forward. And that's unfortunate because I know that Kuang can write good characters. There were some very good characters written in the Poppy War. Now, I don't love the Poppy War. In fact, I ripped the last book to shreds. I liked the first book. I thought the second book was like, eh. Third book I thought was horrible. But there were side characters written there that were extremely well done. So I'm not quite sure what the choice was here and why she made this decision, but it is what it is. So let's go to the writing style. I thought the writing style here was a big improvement from the Poppy War. I was critical of the Poppy War's writing style. It felt pretty bland and straight to the point. There were a lot of thought-provoking statements here that really made me read them a few times and go wow, that was really well put. Good job, Kuang. So yeah, I thought that Kuang has improved as a writer over time, and it increased my enjoyability, and probably one of the reasons that I had a hard time putting this book down until it got to the later stage of this book, where I was like, ugh, I just gotta push through this book. So that's unfortunate. To close out, I will just say that I get why this book is very highly acclaimed. I think there is a lot of pathways right now for these books that have these kind of very overt political messages in them. And they have a broad appeal to the fantasy genre. That doesn't work super well for me, especially when the political themes that are being thrown at me are so one-dimensional. I work in politics. I'm a chief of staff for a politician. My life is politics, and I get that politics is not one-dimensional, that things are extremely complicated. And the vast majority of people that are involved in making these decisions are doing them because they believe in their heart that they're right. Aren't these evil actors and these truly amazing actors. They're just people trying to live their lives and do their best. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to this, usually the people that make the news. But in my experience, that's how the vast majority of politicians and people that work in politics are in real life. I want more nuance to my political themes, and I didn't get it here. But I totally understand people that do like this more, in-your-face kind of themes. Yeah, just not my type of thing. I will also say that, I think there's some major twists here that are going to be very intriguing to a lot of people. Unfortunately, I figured out the twists kind of well before they came out, and that's disappointing. I love to be surprised by twists, and I'm not very good at figuring out twists. So on the rare occasion where I can figure them out, looking at you, 5th season, looking at you, Babel, it takes out a lot of the enjoyment that I would otherwise have gotten. So, yeah. Do I think you should read this book? Yeah, I think you should. But I don't think you should go into this book thinking, I'm going to be reading a masterpiece. Hopefully you get surprised and you end up reading a masterpiece. That's the way you want things to happen. It's so much better to go in with lower expectations. I think you should here, but you should give it a read. Everyone's reading this book. Everyone's talking about it. Join in if you haven't done so yet. Just, keep yourself a little bit reserved. So I am going to close out my review there. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Sky, Russell, Ron Reich, Romeo Mike, and CJ.